I want you to picture a scene with me. It's July 1945. The setting is the British Somaliland Protectorate, right in the Horn of Africa.
And the atmosphere there is tense. World War II is over in Europe, but here, things are just about to explode.
Exactly. It's an absolute powder keg. And right in the middle of it all, you have this one British officer, a Lieutenant Edmondson.
And he's completely surrounded. He's facing this group of angry, very suspicious Somali pastoralists that they're holding spears.
Right. And to, de-escalate things.
Yeah.
He does something that I'm pretty sure is not in any military textbook.
No, definitely not.
He reaches into a sack, scoops up this handful of what looks like bran, but it's actually arsenic-laced poison bait for locusts. And he eats it.
He just eats it, shovels it into his mouth.
In a tea shop, no less.
Yeah.
It's just an insane image.
It sounds completely crazy to us, but you have to get the context here. This was a performance. It was high-stakes theater.
He was trying to prove it was safe.
Exactly. To prove this stuff wouldn't kill their livestock, their camels. But the thing is, it didn't work.
No, it did the opposite. This moment, this whole dispute over bug poison, it basically lit the fuse for a war.
And that's what we're diving into today. The 1945 Sheikh Bashir Rebellion.
We're going to look at how a fight over an environmental policy, killing locusts, turned into this full-blown nationalist uprising. We'll talk about the legacy of a man they call the Lion of Bur Dhab, and a philosophy that I think is really going to stick with you. Muscle partakes in war.
It's just a classic case of how a seemingly small incident can tap into decades of resentment. I mean, to really understand why a British officer is eating poison, we have to look at the atmosphere in Somaliland before 1945.
Yeah, because on the surface, things should have been pretty calm, right? The British had this famous hands-off strategy.
They did. For a long time, their policy was called care and maintenance.
Care and maintenance. What did that actually mean on the ground?
It meant they were mostly just interested in the strategic location, protecting the trade route to Aden, getting fresh meat for the garrison there. They weren't trying to build a huge colonial state like in India or Kenya.
So they basically left the Somali people alone.
For decades, yeah, to their traditional pastoral life.
So if that was the model,
yeah,
and it was working, why change it? Why did the British suddenly start, interfering so much?
Well, in a word, insecurity. You have to remember the timeline. In 1940, the Italians actually invaded British Somaliland.
And they kicked the British out.
They kicked them out, which, for the British Empire, was a massive, massive humiliation. So when they finally came back and retook the territory in 1941, they weren't confident anymore. They were paranoid.
They felt like they had to clamp down.
They felt a desperate need to assert control, to fix the administration so they wouldn't lose it again.
And I'm guessing fixing things, in colonial terms, means
more rules, more taxes. Exactly that. The old care and maintenance approach was totally dead. Now it was all about interfering and regulating. They brought in new taxes. They tried to disarm the pastoralists.
So you go from being left alone for 40 years to suddenly having the government in your face, demanding your money and your guns.
And trust was already at rock bottom. There had been a mutiny in the Somaliland Camel Corps just the year before, in 44. The tinder was just so dry.
And then came the locusts?
Then came the locusts.
Yeah.
May 1945. Huge, massive swarms. Now, from the British perspective, the solution is obvious. It's science.
Right. You spread the poison bait, you kill the locusts, you prevent a salmon. It's logical.
But logic doesn't work when there's no trust. The rumor mill just went into overdrive.
And what was the rumor?
The widespread belief was that this wasn't about locusts at all. It was a secret plot to destock the land.
Okay, we need to pause on that word. Destocking. Today that sounds like, I don't know, inventory management.
But in a pastoralist society, it's an existential threat. It means killing the herds. You have to understand, camels aren't just animals there.
They're everything.
They're the banking system. They're your 401k, your savings account, the currency for everything from marriages to legal disputes.
So if the government kills your camels, they're not just destroying property, they're wiping out your entire net worth.
And your children's future. The belief was the British were poisoning the land to kill the camels, get rid of the Somalis, and bring in European settlers.
Wow. So when they saw Lieutenant Edmondson spreading that poison, they didn't see help. They saw an invasion.
An existential threat. Which is why Edmondson's little stunt in the tea shop was so desperate. He was trying to debunk this massive conspiracy theory.
It's just a complete breakdown in communication. The British are thinking we're helping, and the locals are thinking they're trying to exterminate us.
And that kind of vacuum, It's always filled by a leader, and in this case, that leader was Sheikh Bashir Sheikh Yusuf.
This guy's story is incredible. If you were casting a revolutionary for a movie, you'd write this character.
He had the pedigree, that's for sure. He was the nephew of the famous Mad Mullah, Sayyid Mohammed Abdullah Hassan.
The leader of the dervish movement, the one who fought the British for 20 years.
The very same. Bashir was actually born in the dervish capital, Taleh. He was practically resistance royalty.
But he wasn't just writing on his uncle's name. He had this very specific, aggressive philosophy.
Yeah, there's this one anecdote that just perfectly captures who he was.
The one with the other priests.
That's the one. At the time, you had other religious leaders who were responding to the British by, chanting and praying.
Passive resistance.
Right.
Right.
And Bashir just wasn't having it. He puts a tin can or maybe a glass in front of them and says, okay, break this with your prayers.
Which obviously
does nothing. The can just sits there. So Bashir picks up a big stick and just smashes it flat.
And that's when he says it.
That's when he drops the line that becomes the motto for the whole rebellion. Muruk ba dagal gala.
Muscle partakes in war.
Exactly. It's a direct critique of just praying for change. He's saying, God helps those who help themselves, but you need force to break the British administration.
He's moving from theology to action. And he moves fast. It's July 1945. The locust panic is at its peak, and Bashir decides it's time.
He gathers a group at Watamago, and this is the part that always gets me. It's not some massive army.
How many men?
Initially. About 25.
25 guys. That's it. Against the British Empire.
25 committed men. He puts them on a lorry truck, and they just drive straight to Burao, the administrative center.
It sounds like a suicide mission. Like something out of a movie.
And on the night of July 3rd, they strike. It was a really daring, coordinated raid. They hit the central prison.
Why the prison?
Because it was filled with people arrested during the anti-locust riots.
Yeah.
He was freeing his allies. At the same time, another group attacked the district commissioner's house and killed his guard. They just threw the whole place into chaos.
With 25 men.
God,
They punched way above their weight.
It was deeply humiliating for the British. I mean, think about it. They've just helped win a world war. And now, a handful of guys in a truck have just raided their headquarters and vanished into the night.
Where did they go?
They retreated to the Bur Dhab Mountains, a really rugged, strategic area. They took over a fort there, and for a few days, the British couldn't touch them.
I read that the British actually considered abandoning the entire interior of the Protectorate because of this. Is that true?
It is. That's how fragile their control really was. They realized that without railways and a massive occupation force, they couldn't stop men like Bashir. For a moment, the Lion of Bur Dhab had pushed the empire back to the sea.
But the empire always strikes back.
Always. They mobilized Indian and South African troops. They brought in a top police general, James David, to lead the assault.
And that leads to the big showdown, right, on July 7th.
Yeah. The British troops finally cornered Bashir and his men in the Bur Dhab Mountains. But this wasn't some easy mop-up operation. It was a fierce, fierce firefight.
And the casualty list from this one battle is pretty shocking for a colonial skirmish.
It really is. Sheikh Bashir fought to the death. His second-in-command was also killed, and this is the part that stunned the administration, the British commander, General James David, was also killed in the fight.
The general died too. Wow. That's not how these stories usually go.
Not at all. Usually the rebel leader dies and the British officer retires with a medal. Taking out the top police commander sent a massive shockwave. It proved Bashir's point.
Muscle does partake in war.
It absolutely does. So Bashir is dead, the rebellion is technically crushed, but this is where the British make a huge, huge mistake.
They win the battle, but they completely lose the optics war.
A catastrophic mistake. Instead of allowing for a proper burial, they took Bashir's body back to Burao and put it on public display.
To intimidate people, to say, this is what happens when you rebel.
But it backfired. Horribly. In Somali culture, mistreating a body is a terrible offense. Instead of creating fear, it created a martyr. It turned him into a legend.
And then they went after the camels.
Yes. The collective punishment ordinance. This was maybe the most devastating part. They couldn't catch the remaining rebels, so they punished the entire clan. They seized 6,000 camels from the Habrajolo, Bashir's clan.
6,000. So let's go back to that banking analogy. This is the government freezing the assets of an entire community.
It's economic warfare on a massive scale.
Yep.
And they held them hostage. The policy was brutal. They would release 300 camels for every one rebel that was surrendered.
Did it work?
In the short term, yes. The pressure on the clan elders was just too much. They eventually cooperated to get their livelihood back. But the idea of resistance, that had already escaped.
It didn't stop there.
No, it spread to other towns like Arigavo and Batan. You had other priests, other locals picking up rifles and spears. The fire had already caught.
And this is where the poetry comes in, which I found fascinating. It shows just how globally aware this resistance was.
Absolutely. Poetry is the traditional mass media in Somali society. It's the history book and the newspaper, all in one. And a poet named Haji Adan Af-Qallooc immortalized the rebellion.
He wrote one poem called The Corpse of Bashir.
Yes, protesting the mistreatment of the body. But he also wrote another one, Gabanimo, which means freedom, while he was in jail. And this is where it gets really interesting.
He starts name-dropping, right? He mentions Gandhi.
He mentions Gandhi, Kwame Nkrumah in the Gold Coast, Jamal Abdel Nasser in Egypt.
Wait, hold on. How does a poet in a jail cell in 1945 Somaliland even know what Gandhi is doing in India?
It just shatters that myth of the isolated native, doesn't it? These men were listening to the radio, they were getting news from the port of Aden, they knew the British Empire was starting to crumble elsewhere.
So when he says Gandhi was in this prison, he's not just complaining, he's reframing their whole struggle.
He's elevating it. He's telling his people, look, we're not just common criminals. We are political prisoners, just like the men who are dismantling the British Raj in India. He connects a local fight over locust poison to the global story of anti-colonialism.
That is an incredibly modern perspective for 1945.
It is, and it explains why Bashir's legacy is so powerful and lasting.
And it's a legacy that's still very much alive today. I saw that just recently, in August 2025, the president of Somaliland laid a foundation stone for a restored Sheikh Bashir monument.
In Burao, yes, there are schools named after him. He's seen as this crucial bridge between the old religious resistance of the dervishes and the modern nationalism that led to independence in 1960.
It's just amazing to think that all of this, the martyrdom, the national monuments, the poetry, it all started because of a fundamental misunderstanding about bug poison.
It really just shows you how fragile colonial rule was. You can have all the military might in the world, but if you don't have the trust of the people, one little spark can burn the whole thing down.
And Sheikh Bashir was that spark.
He was. He saw a problem and decided that prayer wasn't enough. Muscle was needed. And even though he died on that mountain, his actions pushed the history of that entire region in a new direction.
It's just a powerful story. We tend to think of World War II ending and then peace just breaking out everywhere.
But for so many people around the world, the real fight for freedom was just getting started.
Which brings us to a final thought. That poison bait moment is so telling. It makes you wonder, how often in history do good intentions, like stopping a famine spiral into violence, just because of a complete and total lack of trust between the rulers and the ruled?
When communication breaks down, that's when muscle takes over.
And muscle partakes in war. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.